A buddy of mine, sharp guy, good career, genuinely decent human being, spent 11 years building a life with someone, bought a house together, had 2 kids, coached their soccer team on Saturdays. Then one Tuesday morning he got served papers at his front door. 18 months later, he was paying rent on a 1-bedroom apartment, seeing his children every other weekend, and handing over a portion of every paycheck to someone he no longer lived with. He didn't cheat. He wasn't abusive. He wasn't checked out. He just never read the contract he signed. And that right there is the conversation we need to have today. Not a rant. Not a red pill lecture. A real, honest, eyes wide open look at what modern marriage actually is, legally, psychologically, financially, because the version most men are sold growing up is missing several very important chapters. Most guys walk into marriage thinking about the relationship, the love, the shared future, the partnership. All of that is real and it matters. But simultaneously, without most men realizing it, they are also entering a legally binding government contract with terms they never reviewed, never negotiated, and cannot easily change once signed. Here's the layer that rarely gets discussed. The legal protections built into divorce law in most Western countries were constructed during a period when the majority of wives had no independent income. The financial provisions, asset division formulas, spousal maintenance, certain custody defaults were designed specifically to shield economically dependent homemakers from being left with nothing. At the time, that made complete sense, but we're not in that era anymore. Most women today are educated, working, and financially self-sufficient. The social reality shifted decades ago. The legal frameworks, they've moved much more slowly. In many jurisdictions, the rules still operate on assumptions built for a world that no longer exists. What does that look like in practice? In a significant number of states and countries, assets accumulated during the marriage are considered marital property, regardless of who primarily earned them. If your income substantially exceeded your partner's, you may owe ongoing spousal support after separation even when both of you are capable adults. And custody, despite genuine legal reforms over the past 2 decades, still tends to favour primary maternal placement in everyday courtroom outcomes, even when a father has been equally present and engaged throughout his children's lives. That's not a relationship failure. That's a contract with asymmetric exit terms. And handing a man a marriage license without explaining any of that is, frankly, a strange gap in how we prepare people for one of the biggest legal commitments of their lives. Your move, practically speaking, before any conversation about rings or proposals, book an hour with a family law attorney in your specific jurisdiction, not as a pessimist. As a prepared adult, you wouldn't sign a business partnership agreement without understanding its terms. This carries far higher stakes. You've probably heard some version of the divorce rate figure, somewhere between 40 and 50%, depending on the country and how it's measured. That number has been cited so often, it's almost lost its meaning, but there's a dimension buried underneath it that almost nobody mentions. The divorce rate measures how many marriages legally end. It says nothing about how many of the ones that didn't end are actually functioning, fulfilling relationships. Researchers who've spent careers studying couples, people like relationship psychologists who observe thousands of pairs over decades, consistently find a significant category of marriages that remain legally intact but are characterized by emotional withdrawal, low intimacy, chronic conflict, or simple cohabitation out of habit or financial dependency. The technical survival of a marriage and the actual quality of that marriage are 2 entirely different measurements, and now pile this on top of that. Large-scale life satisfaction studies show a consistent pattern where men report sharper drops in personal happiness in the years immediately following marriage compared to women. Meanwhile, women, particularly those with established careers and strong social circles, report higher well-being following divorce than they experienced in the final years of marriage. That's not a moral indictment of anyone. It's data about how the institution, as it currently operates, distributes its costs and its benefits. Pause on that for a second. When a marriage is healthy and thriving, both partners gain. When it deteriorates, the off-ramp is not symmetrically structured. Women, on average, maintain wider support networks, face less social stigma around emotional processing, and hold a legal position that more reliably softens the financial blow of separation. Men, on average, are less likely to have built those support systems, carry more social pressure to suppress relationship distress, and face a legal exit that tends to be more costly in concrete terms. This doesn't mean the institution is irredeemable. It means going in naively, assuming love is enough to make the mechanics irrelevant, is a gamble that the numbers consistently punish. The practical response: use this knowledge to raise your emotional baseline before committing to anyone. Research is unambiguous that men who've invested in therapy, cultivated genuine friendships, and developed real self-awareness before marriage produce dramatically better relational outcomes. You cannot outsource your unresolved inner conflicts to a partnership. They travel with you. There's a pattern that plays out so gradually most men don't register it until they're already deep inside it. A guy in his late 20s is a full, distinct person. He surfs on weekends or restores old motorcycles or is serious about his fitness or has a small circle of close friends he's known since college. He has ambitions beyond the next promotion. He knows what he finds funny, what genuinely excites him, what he believes about the world. Then a serious relationship begins, and over the following 3 to 5 years, piece by piece, that distinct person starts dissolving into a shared unit. His hobbies become things he used to do. His friendships thin out because couples socialize as couples. His opinions start bending toward maintaining harmony rather than honest expression. His individual goals quietly drift into the background, while joint logistics consume the foreground. Psychologists have a name for this process: identity fusion. And when it becomes one-sided, it's genuinely corrosive, not just to the man experiencing it, but to the relationship itself. Here's the part that catches men completely off guard: the gradual self-erasure that feels like devotion. I'm putting us first. I'm sacrificing for this relationship actually drives down attraction over time. Relationship research across multiple studies confirms this clearly. Partners sustain desire and respect when both individuals remain recognizably themselves, distinct people with their own gravity. The moment one person becomes entirely defined by the partnership, something critical is lost, and the partner who received that devotion often can't articulate why they feel less drawn to the person who gave them everything. So you get this loop. Man abandons his own identity as an act of love. Partner gradually loses attraction to the man she fell for because he no longer resembles that person. Emotional distance grows. Neither of them fully understands why. This isn't a character flaw, it's conditioning. Men are culturally programmed from early ages to express love through sacrifice and provision. A real man puts his family first. That instinct isn't wrong in itself, but taken to its logical extreme, it produces men who have hollowed themselves out in the name of partnership and feel genuinely lost at 40. What's worth protecting here? Before marriage, and actively throughout a long-term relationship, maintain what psychologists call your autonomous identity. Keep friendships that are entirely yours. Preserve pursuits that have nothing to do with the relationship. Hold on to goals that are personal, not just shared. Not as emotional distance, as foundation. A man who knows precisely who he is doesn't need a relationship to answer that question. And that man, counterintuitively, is far better equipped to show up fully for someone else. Step back from the emotional conversation for a moment and look at this from a purely structural standpoint. The average wedding in the US runs somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000. Studies have found a negative correlation between wedding expenditure and marital longevity, meaning couples who spent more on the wedding tended to have shorter marriages, one expensive day with no predictive relationship to the success of what follows it. That's the minor point. Here's the larger one. During marriage, finances legally merge in ways that have real consequences if the relationship ends. Assets built during the marriage are typically subject to division. income gaps can generate ongoing financial obligations post-divorce. Attorney fees for contested divorces routinely reach 5 figures. The average divorce proceeding in the United States takes over a year to resolve. During that year, you're managing legal costs, potential temporary support payments, and a level of psychological stress that demonstrably impacts job performance, health outcomes, and every relationship in your life. Men who've walked through divorce describe it consistently as the single most financially and emotionally destructive experience of their lives, not because marriage is inherently bad, but because the exit architecture was never designed, with their outcomes in mind. Now consider the alternative structure that an increasing number of committed couples are choosing. Long-term partnerships without legal marriage can involve every meaningful component of a shared life: shared home, shared finances by choice, co-parenting, genuine lifelong commitment, while maintaining individual financial autonomy and removing the government contract from the equation entirely. If the relationship ends, each person separates with clarity rather than through an adversarial legal process. This isn't settling for less. For a growing number of people, it's a rational adult assessment of which structure actually fits the relationship they want to build. Concrete step worth taking. If marriage is the direction you're moving, a prenuptial agreement is not a signal of distrust. It is the evidence that two adults can have a frank, mature conversation about worst-case scenarios, and couples who can have that conversation before the wedding consistently demonstrate better long-term financial and relational health than those who avoid it. Here's the piece of this conversation that tends to land hardest. Marriage, real, lasting, genuinely good marriage, is one of the most psychologically demanding things a human being can attempt, and the overwhelming majority of men step into it having received almost no relevant preparation. Consider what it actually requires: emotional self-regulation, so that your partner is not constantly managing your unprocessed stress. Communication skills that go far beyond talking, the ability to express vulnerability without shutting down, to listen without immediately problem-solving, to hold space for someone else's experience without centering yourself. The ongoing renegotiation of roles and expectations as two people grow and evolve over decades, and conflict resolution that doesn't rely on withdrawal, contempt, defensiveness, or criticism, 4 behaviors that relationship researchers have identified as the patterns most predictive of eventual relationship failure. How many men were explicitly taught any of that? The honest answer, for most, is none. Men are told to be reliable, to work hard, to be faithful. As if 3 things constitute a complete skill set for one of the most complex relational challenges humans undertake. They don't. And so you see this recurring pattern: good intentions, genuine affection, catastrophic communication, slow accumulation of unspoken grievance, and eventually a relationship that has become functionally roommate-level intimacy rather than actual partnership. Research on who initiates divorce shows women file roughly 70% of cases, not because women are predatory or disloyal, but because in many marriages the emotional disconnection was experienced first and more acutely by the wife, while the husband either didn't register it or didn't know how to address it. Both people were often already checked out. One of them just moved first. Where this leaves you: if commitment is on your horizon, treat the preparation for it the way you'd treat preparation for anything that matters. Read serious relationship research. Do premarital counseling with an actual therapist, not the 2-session religious formality, but substantive work before you're already in crisis mode. Learn your attachment patterns. Understand how you behave under emotional pressure. Clarify your values around money, children, career, and family before those topics become live conflicts. Be honest with yourself about whether you're choosing this person or defaulting to this person because the timing felt right and everyone else was doing it. That distinction, chosen versus defaulted, predicts more about long-term marital satisfaction than almost any other variable. After everything covered above, the framing of this conversation needs to be revisited. Why men should never get married is a provocative frame. It's designed to get your attention. But the more accurate version of this conversation is simpler. Most men are making one of the most consequential decisions of their lives without anything close to adequate information, preparation, or self-knowledge. Marriage, when it works, genuinely works, not just endures, produces measurable positive outcomes for men, longer lifespan, higher reported sense of purpose, greater wealth accumulation over time. These are real findings. They're just heavily conditional on how you enter it, who you enter it with, and how prepared both people actually are. The men who build lasting, satisfying partnerships share a cluster of characteristics that have nothing to do with luck. They knew themselves before they committed. They had done enough internal work to understand their own patterns. They selected a partner based on deep value alignment, not chemistry and timing alone. They had the uncomfortable conversations before the wedding. Finances, children, expectations, boundaries, not after. And they chose the structure of their partnership deliberately, as two adults making a clear-eyed decision, rather than sliding into it because the social script demanded it. For other men, long-term committed partnership outside the legal framework is an increasingly legitimate and well-examined option. You can build a full life with someone, raise children, share finances by choice, commit completely, without the legal contract that creates asymmetric risk. This isn't settling for a lesser version of love. For many people, it is the version of love that makes the most structural sense. And for some men, the most honest answer right now is neither. The answer is doing the work first. Building the financial stability, emotional depth, and clear personal identity that make you genuinely ready for that level of commitment, rather than using a relationship as a substitute for the self-development you haven't done yet. That's not avoidance, that's integrity. Every conversation about marriage that leaves out legal mechanics, psychological preparation, financial structure, and honest self-assessment is an incomplete conversation. And incomplete conversations lead to decisions men spend decades recovering from. None of this is about fear of women, or fear of commitment, or retreating into isolation. It's about something much more straightforward, making a major life decision with your full attention rather than on autopilot. The men who do this well, and there are many of them, aren't lucky. They're prepared. They're self-aware. They chose consciously rather than drifting in because it was expected. You now have more of the picture than most men ever get. What you do with it is entirely yours.